The arming squire was actually a combination of a valet and a washerwoman. To plumb the depths of the knightly hierarchy, I've come to Arundel Castle in West Sussex. Paul, look at the state of you. You're supposed to be a knight in shining armour. He looks as though he's been hit by a load of cowpats. Would you really have looked like that at the end of a battle?
Probably even worse than that, to be honest. This, as you see, is everyday work for myself. It's pretty grimy, it's wet, it's slimy. I've been in it for probably 8 hours. I haven't had a toilet break, so things are pretty hot and sweaty and smelly in here as well.
Gavin, you're his arming squire.
Yeah.
When he comes back after 8 hours on the field, what's the worst part of the job for you?
Basically taking him out of the armour. He might have fallen into blood. He's going to fall into where horses have been cut down.
So how do we get it off?
Well, we'll start with the helm, just to give him a little bit of air now.
So what would you be doing while he was bashing away at the enemy for 8 hours?
Well, if he hadn't called me to be at his side on the field of battle as well, I would be at the back of the lines, maybe with another piece of armour if something was broken, if he got called. I could be there just to run in and help him out.
Would you have been trained much before you could do all this?
Oh, very much. I mean, I started off as a page, then I would become a squire, and at some point, maybe in my late teens, early 20s, at that point, if I was brave enough and if I had warranted enough, then I would be knighted.
So Gavin, have you got the chance to end up like Paul, a proper full-fledged knight?
That's right, yeah. So I've been in his service for many years. So I'd be trained up in the ways of the knight, the ways of chivalry.
Even to carve my meat as well.
Yeah.
Beg your pardon?
You have to carve my meat, you have to learn how to carve that in a proper, fashionable manner.
Basically, you're like a Formula One pit team, aren't you?
Pretty much so.
A good team would be like a Formula One team. You could get in and out of it relatively quickly. The problem, of course, is what you're going to do once you're out of it, and some poor person has to clean all the things, and that's likely to be my squire or any other attendants that I've got within the camp.
There are 24 pieces of armour in a full suit, weighing up to 27 kilograms, supported by a leather harness and worn over a hot and sweaty padded jacket. Oh dear, oh dear. If you'd been scared during the course of the battle, I wouldn't want to have been down here.
And of course, most of it is running down literally my legs.
Yes, all right. That's a step too far for me. In order to clean up the dirty armour, the arming squire would have used vinegar and sand, like this stuff here. Occasionally they used to include a bit of urine into the mix to give added zest. As you can see, it's pretty effective, although it's horrible stuff. It would remove your fingerprints pretty quickly. But this is just the tedium of the camp. What would the actual battle have been like? Before you got to clean out the armour, you had to get to the battlefield, and that could be a nightmare. Take the most famous conflict of the Middle Ages, the Battle of Agincourt. Our squire would have marched 260 miles through France in 17 days, living outdoors in almost continuous heavy rain. Food and clean drinking water were scarce. Dysentery killed far more soldiers on the way to Agincourt than died on the battlefield. The English were hopelessly outnumbered, but the heavy rains created a quagmire for the French cavalry in their heavy armour. They became sitting ducks for the English army's mightiest weapon, the longbow. In the end, it was the archers that did it. They won the battle. Their arrows might not have been able to pierce a suit of armour, but they could kill the horses, and they did. They decimated them. Now, you might think that being an archer was one of the better medieval jobs, but in many ways it wasn't. If you got captured, you had your fingers sliced off, and at the end of the battle, it really did become one of the worst jobs in history. There were no doctors on the battlefield, no St. John's ambulance running around with stretchers, so the archers used to wander among the carnage, and when they found someone who was seriously injured, they put them out of their misery. In the year 1348, the Black Death swept into England from Europe. It decimated the population and killed around about 2 million men, women and children in a couple of years. Understandably, people began to get more and more frightened of falling ill. course, we know that they were fighting a losing battle against overcrowding and poor sanitation. Remember, in those days, household waste and excrement were just chucked out of the windows into the streets in the towns and in the cities. But most people had no idea that that was the cause of their problems. And instead, in their panic, they began to rely on a whole host of bizarre remedies. And for us, that means lots more worse jobs. Medical theories were sophisticated, but as we now know, hopelessly misguided. Success rates were terribly low, even before the plague. So any career in medieval medicine was bound to be frustrating. Oh, and messy. Very messy. How about a few of these if you don't fancy walking around with a bottle of aspirin? Leeches. In the medieval period, these were a staple medical treatment. The idea was that as they sucked the blood out of you, they'd suck the badness out as well. In fact, they were so popular that it brings me on to my next disgusting job, leech collector. By the 20th century, leeches were almost declared extinct, so I'm heading for one of the few spots left for a leech safari. Romney Marshes in Kent.